we're very open and I wouldn't say necessarily agnostic, but we serve our customers not just from a data perspective, but also from a advisory perspective as well. And so we always try to position ourselves as a partner and not just a data provider.
Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is Gary Kotovets. Gary is the Chief Data and Analytics Officer of Dun Bradstreet, a global provider of business decisioning data and analytics that earns nearly $2.4 billion in annual revenue. Gary's been in his role for nearly 5.5 years, and in it, he leads the company's data and analytics strategy globally and is responsible for enterprise data governance and exploring new digital and alternative data and analytics opportunities. Prior to joining Dun Bradstreet, Gary spent nearly 2 decades in leadership roles across Bloomberg LP's data and exchange businesses, concluding his tenure as the global head of data acquisition and management. Gary, welcome to Technovation. It's great to speak with you today.
Thank you. Thank you. Likewise.
Wonderful. Well, Gary, talk a bit about Dun Bradstreet for the uninitiated. Talk a bit about the business that you are in.
Sure. So Dun Bradstreet, has been around for a pretty long time. It's one of the largest B2B data and analytics companies in the world, if not the largest. It's a trusted source with nearly, as I said, almost 200 years of experience. We provide data to our customers to make probably some of the most critical decisions in their day-to-day business, such as credit decisions or supply chain decisions or sales or marketing related growth opportunities and decisions. And really our job is to make sure that we give them the most comprehensive and complete information in order for them to be able to do business with their counterparties. Our job is really to collect as much data as possible on all of those entities around the world.
So very much a data-centric business, as you highlight, Gary, and you are in a role that is squarely leading data and analytics. Yes. Talk a bit about your purview as Chief Data and Analytics Officer in greater detail, if you would.
Sure. So as you mentioned, it's a sort of central global role. Really the responsibility is to identify and qualify data sources, alternative data sources, take them in, normalize them, clean them, and make them available to our customers. And underlying that is really a strategy that really is pinned on what our customer wants, right? And really, as I mentioned, the fact that we service your chief risk officer, chief data officer, chief revenue, chief marketing officer, chief supply chain officer, those are the key roles and personas that we serve on a day-to-day basis with our customers, with our data rather. And my job is to kind of look at kind of their needs and always start from the end, right? The end is them, right? So we first start with, what do you want? What is it that you need from us to make your jobs easier, more efficient? And most importantly, how do I make sure that you trust as you incorporate our data into your applications and into your automation processes, and we'll obviously talk a lot about AI. How do I make sure that the information that I'm providing you and the capabilities that I'm giving you are trustworthy enough in order to incorporate them into those most critical decision processes?
Fascinating. And Gary, can you talk about, as there is such a customer centricity, how do you literally engage with those customers? And I'd imagine they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. I wonder how you even think about different personas or different needs based upon where they're from.
Yeah, so, we have a global customer base. It's pretty wide, I would say, spectrum. We have really small customers, whether they're literally a small mom and pop businesses, right, all the way to some of the largest Fortune 500 corporations in the world, right? And so really, my engagement kind of spans across that entire spectrum. Everything from surveys, right, and indirect kind of communication through our sales product teams, all the way to me personally, engaging dozens of times, I would say, on a monthly basis with either chief data officers or chief supply chain officers or risk officers, et cetera, where I personally, as well as my team, try to really understand their problems on a day-to-day basis and help them find solutions.
So fascinating. Oftentimes, your customers are also your peers in other organizations. That
Absolutely.
must put you in a great position to be able to understand what they're going through. Speak not as a salesperson, but as a truly as a peer, and speak their language, so to say, as you're going through those
Yeah.
collaborations. Is that
Yeah,
fair?
that's exactly right. And that's a really good point. I'm probably one of the most, trusted people that they can actually engage with because not only do I try to solve the problem with my own sort of data and analytics, right? But I also try to give them a more holistic view of, best practices, types of technologies they should be using in their own, environments and the types of maybe even alternative data assets that they should also bring in along with my data. So we're very open and I wouldn't say necessarily agnostic, but we serve our customers not just from a data perspective, but also almost from a advisory perspective as well. And to your point, that helps a lot with them sort of opening up a lot more and telling us more than telling me probably more than they would tell a sales guy, for example. What are some of their most concerning issues and challenges, and so we always try to position ourselves as a partner and not just a data provider.
Fascinating. Some significant advantages to you in that set of responsibilities, as you note. The extent to which, of course, you have consequential internal responsibilities, information and data resides across a vast organization like yours in consequential ways. Can you talk a bit about how you collaborate with your peers to successfully generate value from your data?
Yeah, sure. So we within our organization, my peers would be sort of the chief product officer, chief technology officer, and chief revenue officer, right? So those are all counterparties that we are constantly engaged with, and in fact, we have a sort of a very tight culture within D&B where we have a daily stand up with our CTO, myself, and our chief product officer where we go through day-to-day, daily issues and try to make sure that we kind of get through all of them and ensure that we as a company are on track in meeting our objectives and goals. And so that's been extremely valuable way and strategy in terms of kind of getting things done faster. And of course, as I mentioned, we're all very, very client facing and client focused. And so all of us, as our CTO engages with his counterparties, our chief product officer engages with her counterparties at the different customers. We all gather that feedback from different lenses and then try to combine it together, and that's what kind of starts to morph into a more cohesive strategy and a suite of products and capabilities that we then release to our clients.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I appreciate that overview. I wonder, could you talk a bit about the team that you lead and the skills that they possess and the extent to which, as you mentioned, we'll get, I'm sure, deeper into some of the specifics like artificial intelligence, but just given the pace of change and practices centered around data, how do they continue to refine their skills, which must also be very dynamic as time goes on as well? Talk a bit about that team and its overall skill set.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the team is made up of highly experienced professionals from sort of data engineers and data analysts all the way to data scientists and analytics sort of personnel. The job of if you think about the data engineering aspects, right, their job is always evolving, right, as there are a lot of new technologies and capabilities that are out there that allow us to improve our time to market and improve the quality of the data that we bring in. And that's sort of been their constantly evolving remit, right? So they're very tech focused and skilled, and as well as data focused and skilled, right? So those are kind of the two aspects of what we look for when we bring in an individual within that organization. And obviously in the data science, those are kind of self-explanatory, but at the same time, we also look for not just, okay, are you a really good modeler? But are you also a really good communicator, right? Are you also a problem solver and in a sort of an advisory role to our customers? Like many of our analytics people, engage with customers on day-to-day basis. And they are very solutions kind of focused. So, we don't provide just analytics out of a box. We also create custom analytics. We have capabilities, whether that's our AI lab, where we create custom AI solutions for clients, or whether that's our analytics studio, where we create custom models and scores that are specifically designed for a customer's particular needs. And so all of our analytics people are very much client-facing and solutions architects almost.
Yeah, fascinating. Your responsibilities, as I mentioned in the introduction, include exploring new digital and alternative data and analytics opportunities. Talk a bit about what's suggested by that. And of course, if you wouldn't mind shining a light on some of the very opportunities that have been developed, I'd be interested in those as well.
Sure. So, as you think about the lens of risk, right, or the risk lens of our customers, the risk in the world evolves constantly, right? We at our core offerings, D&B provides financial risk profile and financial risk scores, right? So, for example, failure score, delinquency, and paydex are all predictive, or actually two of them are predictive models that show the likelihood of a company either going bankrupt or will be delinquent in paying their bills. Okay. And then from there, you start to identify other aspects of risk, for example, geopolitical, geospatial, like climate risks, operational risks, right? Understanding, the physical activity of what's happening around that company, right? Digital, I would say, exposure, right? So how does that company do business mainly, right? Is it a brick and mortar, or is it an online business? What is its social profile and social risk and exposure? And so really, we're continuously looking for alternative data and other data assets that give us those signals that we can then kind of bring in and incorporate into and build new scores, right? So as an example, let's talk about social media, right? If you bring in data from, let's say, Yelp, right? And you start to look at that data and think, okay, and start to find correlations between negative reviews of a restaurant over an extended period of time, and then the likelihood of that restaurant being in under financial stress over a period of time. And we found a lot of really close correlations between the two. And so as we discover that, and we play around with that data and discover that there is a signal, and that signal gives us an uplift, so to speak, to our scores, we then incorporate that. We have the data operations team take that data, incorporate it, run it through our supply chain, and then provide it to our analytics team, who then incorporates that into our financial scores and signals. Merchant data is another big one that we recently made a big splash about. So credit card transactions, and understanding how, what is basically the cash flow of that business, right? And the frequency, the volume, and the amount of dollars that are flowing in through credit cards is an extremely meaningful and impactful data set that has a significant impact, almost up to 30% uplift in a financial score of a company. And so that's the kind of stuff that we're constantly identifying, qualifying, and then testing, validating, and then bringing in.
Very interesting. And talking about, as we've each noted now, the use of artificial intelligence, I can only imagine it's a remarkable catalyst to do the things you've been describing. Talk about AI, generative AI, other areas on the ascent of artificial intelligence that have been incorporated into your practices, please. Yeah,
absolutely. So obviously, that's like one of the number one topics that everybody talks about for the last, I would say, 2.5, 3 years-ish. And so have we, right? We've been, I think, at the forefront in many instances, right when, GenAI kind of came out and GPT came out and OpenAI, and, the talk around this topic kind of became much more frequent, and the area became much more, I would say, commoditized, right? We've been using large language models in-house for a very long time around and integrated them already into many of our data quality and data operation procedures. Like, for example, one of the areas we service our customers in is we provide contact details on particular corporate officers in a company. And as you can imagine, when you have 600 million businesses on file, you have, exponentially more contacts that work in those businesses. And managing that information on a frequent basis becomes very challenging. And so that's where large language models come in to help really identify new sources of that kind of information. We use large language models to extract a lot of that information out of those sources. And then in some instances, we use it to actually even synthetically generate, autofill the title or the email domain of that particular officer based on, for example, other people who work in that company and the domain names that they have. So those are the types of capabilities that we have been using for a long time internally. And now sort of come, the new wave, right, in this topic, we kicked off this area in a couple of different ways. So we went out to our customers and asked, okay, well, what do you think you want to do here, right, with these capabilities? And of course, back then, nobody really had a lot of ideas, but everybody wanted to check the box, so to speak, to say, I'm doing something in GenAI. So really, what we did is we decided to kind of build a more horizontal capabilities, right? And then let our customers be able to work with us to create solutions and have us serve as an advisor for them and help them customize capabilities for their particular needs. So we developed an AI labs, D&B AI labs, which is basically an environment that hosts a bunch of different large language models that are kind of validated, trusted, and authorized by us. And we would allow our customers to either, incorporate our data, or we would work with them to incorporate our data with these large language models. And in some instances, have them load their data in, and then we would create certain capabilities specifically to work for their particular needs. We have created a cyber and a legal, ethical, and compliance sort of framework, right? And a governance really framework around these capabilities that we also share with our customers to make sure that they understand that every new data that we bring in and decide to incorporate into large language models, every capability that we build goes through that review process and that governance to ensure that we're using trusted and validated capabilities and models that are out there, right? And so we kind of done a lot of the pre-work for that customer already. And that's really the idea that, they don't have to establish their own, governance capabilities. They can kind of outsource to us because they already trust us with, like I said before, with a lot of their most critical decisions. So this would just be an add-on to that. And then also pair that with our AI labs. So that was sort of one big area that we developed and launched. The other is, again, more horizontal, is we developed ChatD&B, which is essentially a large language, sort of a capability rather, that allows the customer to interact with our data, okay, in an easy, human readable fashion, in a similar way that you would interact today with ChatGPT application. So you can ask any question as long as you are entitled to that data, you get that answer from our data immediately. And so that allowed us to right away illuminate a lot of the data that we have, since we have so much, right? I mean, again, just to reiterate, you're talking across 600 million businesses, we carry about up to 4,000 to 5,000 different values, right? So you can imagine there's a lot, right? And that stuff changes frequently, daily to monthly, daily, intraday, or monthly basis, right? And so keeping up with all of that information at the same time it is hard, even on us, yet alone on our customers, right? And so this capability lets you really, in a much deeper way, understand what we have and really drive more of the, I would say, upsells and cross-sells opportunities of our data across the customers that have typically not been aware of what else we actually have. And so we're continuing to evolve on that. And, we're building a lot of new features that we think will help customers, like for example, we're planning to verticalize some of those areas to be to work specifically for the persona who's using it, right? So we're kind of tuning the capability to be serving information that's relevant to you in your role, at the time when you need it, right? For example, and a bunch of other things that we're developing. So that's just scratching the surface. I mean, we developed other things around Hoovers, which is our sales and marketing product, where we've deployed a capability where you can just ask a question about a market, like give me a list of companies in New York region of 1 million plus in revenue with 100 employees or more. Okay, and we're able to give you and provide that list to you on the fly, basically. And then the second step would be to generate an email using GenAI to then send to that that list of customers a promotional email or an email describing your products or whatever it is that you want to incorporate in it. And so those are the capabilities that we started to embed. Those are some examples of like the way we're embedding GenAI into our existing products.
Fascinating, Gary. Talk a bit about the balance you see between leveraging off-the-shelf capabilities from a generative AI perspective versus what your team develops that is specific to your organization. As I'm hearing you answer that, I'm inferring some of the balance between those two, but I'm curious about how you strike that balance.
Sure. And so it is a balance, right? And, like everywhere else, I have to kind of have, I would say, almost maybe 3 hats on, right? One is, hat of kind of internally what I want to build myself. Another hat on is what I can potentially buy or use out of a box, to your point. But the third hat is really my customer's hat, right? And the reason I have to wear that hat as well is because as I deploy my capabilities, the same tech providers, right, that give me the tools that I can use to build my own stuff, right, are also selling it to my client. And so really I have to kind of constantly compare and contrast. Okay, so if I build something using these tools or my own tools, will the customer build something better, right? And therefore, why would he need to use me to to supplement those capabilities, right? And so that's kind of the balance that I actually have to maintain. A lot of the things that we've done actually are using out of the box, like I would say, tech stacks, but obviously we're using our own proprietary and in some instances patented capabilities where we patent the way we basically interact with our data, right? And that's not something that a customer can easily replicate, for example. So it is a bit of a hybrid approach that we see, where we're seeing a lot of the kind of 1 + 1 = 3, as opposed to just using one or the other, or, relying on whatever the customer is going to build themselves.
As we go through such a dynamic time, certainly well represented through the anecdotes you shared through this, Gary, and as somebody who needs to remain abreast of ongoing innovation, what are trends that excite you, that maybe ones that we've not yet covered, that as you look to the future that are on your roadmap for further investigation?
The trends are evolving quite rapidly, right? So if you talk to any large hyperscaler last year, they had a very different strategy and approach on, generative AI than they do this year. And like this year, for example, the latest trend across everybody, all of them is, building everything in an agentic framework. Okay. Last year, it was some sort of a combination of hybrids. We built our ChatD&B capability using agents right out of the gate. And what I see now is that a lot of the different sort of agents or modules that you've used in building our own capability, we can actually reuse and in some instances resell through those third-party hyperscalers who are now creating agent marketplaces, where I as a customer can come in and buy a D&B agent that performs entity resolution, for example, and combine that with an agent that does web crawling and other types of tasks, right? And put them together into some sort of a proprietary, seamless workflow that would fit my particular needs. And so, I'm seeing a lot of that modularization, I guess is the right word, and compartmentalization of these different tools and agents that could be combined together into, again, a more singular workflow. So that's more for the more sophisticated customer, right, who wants to build things themselves. And the mid-sized to small customer would still want things out of the box to just solve their particular needs. So there's a lot of verticalization, so to speak, on a persona and an industry basis that's happening, where things are beginning to, these large language models or capabilities are being fine-tuned to serve the particular needs of that individual, right? And so we're trying to kind of balance on both sides and really serve both sides of the spectrum of our customer base.
Makes sense, Gary. I also wanted to ask you here at the close, as somebody who no doubt has to do a lot of reading and listening of others to understand how tectonic shifts are happening. Anything you've recently read, watched, and/or listened to that you would recommend to peers?
Yeah, so I read a lot of kind of blimps and blurs. I would say there's not like a particular segment or book, right, that gives me that's like my Bible, so to speak, right? But like I said, there's a lot of interesting articles from Amazon, Microsoft, IBM, and Google around this whole agent workspace and agent kind of frameworks and marketplaces that they're releasing. So I think there's a lot of interesting kind of material there in terms of, if you want to understand where the market is going, right? So that's kind of one segment. Another segment I would say in interesting topics is around, responsible AI and data quality, right? And how critical that is in the overall to make this whole thing work, right? And so over and over, you hear sort of the same stories, right, around how you have to get your data AI ready. And so it's very interesting kind of to sort of see how we're playing, how big of a role we're playing in that particular category, right? And the fact that, our data has already been, mastered and cleaned and normalized, and we are that trusted source. And so it's kind of interesting to see that we're playing right into our strategy that we've always had is playing right into that theme and topic. So.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Gary Kotovets, thank you so much for taking time with me for this conversation, emblematic of the remarkable work you and your team are doing. It's been fascinating to learn from you, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much, and great meeting you. Thanks for having me.